Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation?
Mind spins in spirals like the Cogito. I think, therefore, but do I even know? Hume said the sun might not rise in the morning. Patterns ain't proof, just habits we adorn. Russell's teapot floating out in the void. Invisible doubts that can't be destroyed. Belief ain't a bird and the skeptic employs. Question the noise, the cosmos ploys. Skeptic's eyes always peeping the fraud. Truth ain't handed down, it's wrestled from the gods. Doubts my temple, my faith is flawed. Think it through twice before I applaud. Induction wobbles like a table with no leg. Hume's knife cuts leave certainty begging. A billion white swans, but I'm black renegade. Shatter the mirror, the cracks cascade. Cogito feels strong, but is it really? Thoughts build castles, clouds act silly. Russell's pot spins in the ether so freely. Prove it exists or the claim's too dreamy. Am I the dreamer or the dream in the show? The car wrestled devils, still didn't know. Faith and senses, they play tricks on a low. Truth's a mirage in a desert of woe.
When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you wish to believe or by what you think could have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts.
Folks, listen up, okay? I've got something tremendous to tell you. Absolutely tremendous. We're going to make America great again, better than ever, and I've found the perfect way to do it. It's called secular Koranism, folks, and it's fantastic. Nobody does it better than this system. Believe me, I've looked at it, studied it. All the smart people I've talked to say it's incredible. We're beginning to bring it to America, and it's going to fix everything that's wrong. All the disasters the radical left and weak Republicans have dumped on. Let's talk about it, okay? It's going to love.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, as always, to Skeptic Philosophy. I am your host, Robert, and thank you for stopping by. What you just seen was a short clip that actually the audio was made from Mr. Phantom, which is here in the channel, which was drawn from, I think, something of a daydream ideology from the page of our next guest. Just thought it was a funny little read, and it wound up getting converted into Trump's own voice. That having been said, we're going to bring our next guest on stage, Miss Claire. Claire, how's it going?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Robert.
No problem. You a little strep throat today or something? Sound a little different. You sounded a little strep there or something.
Yes. I've got this cough that that's lingering after a few weeks, but I should be fine to talk to you all.
Fantastic. So the way that I seen it, I figured there was two best paths probably to go, and I'll leave it to you on the option. First and foremost, off of objective ethics, I raised some pretty clear charges and allegations against what I thought your model was. And you can either start off on addressing some of that or why you insist on calling your model secular when it seems like most people would say that this seems counter-secular, that it doesn't appear secular at all. Where would you like to start on this?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that question, because basically there are certain laws that we just want we want to exist. If we don't want to be murdered, if we don't want to be robbed, if we don't want to be raped, whether or not we believe in God. So
Sure.
I'm saying there is a minimum standard of morality for all of humanity. And then obviously Sharia comes with a few, extra rules that may be controversial. But I think you can explain them in a way that makes social sense, such as the prohibition against usury and other ones.
Sure. The prohibition against usury seems to be the lightest one that I've seen on your website, that I don't think you're going to get much pushback. It's literally every single rule after that that seems to me to be appalling and an approachment on people's civil liberties, and to be an unnecessary approachment on people's civil liberties.
I suppose you're thinking of the ones about sexual morality and treating unmarried parents as sex offenders.
Sure,
Well,
among others.
shall we concentrate on that? Because I think
Sure.
that is really the most difficult for people who are accustomed to a culture
Okay.
of casual sex. I think most people think it's their right to enjoy sexual liberation from the rules of marriage and good parenting. And I think how the West has turned out in the last 50 years, as a consequence of the swinging 60s, the sex revolution, the pill, gay marriage, transgenderism, I think that I think has produced so much of the demographic problems, as well as the
What do you mean demographic problems?
well, I keep telling people who have a problem with Muslim immigration that it is a demographic problem that prompts the business organizations of the West to tell their government, whose campaign funds they contribute to import foreign labor as quickly and cheaply as possible. And that, of course, upsets the local proletariat and creates this anxiety and hatred of Jews and Muslims.
Okay, so we started with unregulated sex, and then we ended with the hatred of Jews and Muslims. So please draw that together for me. I'm not picking it up.
Well, there is a labor shortage, which I notice a few people trying to deny. I mean, people I know who support anti-immigration political parties, and I'm saying the attraction for importing cheap foreign labor is because the local workforce is not up to satisfying the demands of labor of business and commerce.
And again, what does this have to do with sexual promiscuousness or any kind of lack of regulations on sex?
Well, it is to do with how many people do become married parents and how many married parents stay together to properly parent their legitimate offspring. And I don't think it's controversial to say that many marriages in the West fail because of no-fault divorce. And that's because people don't take marriage seriously. And I think feminism has something to do with this.
Right. What do you think specifically is the ethical problem of divorce? Is there, outside of religious ideology, do you see divorce as something that is intrinsically damaging or immoral in of itself?
No, not if it's just the couple who say, well, I want out, and there is no reason to make anybody stay in the marriage if they don't want to, but for a third party, and by that I mean the children of the marriage. So it's not just one of the marriage saying they're bored and irritated and want to do something else. It's also about the parenting of their the children of the marriage.
Sure. Let's get into that subject, because this was one thing that was most strange, and I'm gonna put the blog spot that you initially sent to me. I'm gonna put this on here and see if we can pin that up. If anybody wants to take a look at some of the rules and regulations, this is what first got me interested in having the conversation with you. And it's not something that I just found out of nowhere. It's something that you sent me in conversations on Discord, and I read through it. You've later explained that this was something that was in large part helped with AI generation and whatnot, and you to some degree started hedging on some of the terminologies that were used there. But it's the site's been up for well over a year now, and it still says per Claire Khaw all over the front page of it. And if you didn't like it or you disagreed with something, it was easy enough to pull down. So that having been said, there's some things in here that I find just, and I think you outright call it authoritarianism. I don't think you have a problem with using the term authoritarianism, but so much of what I read there seems so similar to an older Nazi manifesto is what it was. It was what it reads to me. And some of the ideas that we were just talking about, like birth, you mentioned that you don't like that people can have children out of wedlock, and that might be a detriment on the children, right? Or on the family morals. But you also have in here that people that are not married cannot get birth control. So it seems like this is something that you're fighting against yourself in the policies. If you were concerned with them having children out of wedlock, then why forbid birth control?
I didn't say I would completely forbid birth control, just the pill. So the pill would be the privilege of married mothers who have completed their family and the right of working prostitutes. Okay,
and why is that? Why would it be regulated to them if indeed it is your primary control? Because here's what I'm dealing with, Claire, and I don't understand, because it feels like you're saying that it's not the act of the sex itself, but it's the outcome. And then you're preventing them from fixing the outcome while saying, no, it's about the outcome. It's not about the act itself.
Well, yes. Obviously there is harm when most parents are not married parents, and most children are, reared in the fathers' homes of their unmarried mothers, because, there would be links to delinquency and criminality and underachievement and, all kinds of economic and social problems that flow from that. I don't want to be, banning abortion. And I know it's a great issue with Americans, with certain states wanting to ban it, and people wanting to ban it, whatever the reason for the pregnancy. But I'm saying if you deal with a problem from the supply side, then you don't need to worry about banning or not banning abortion. Because people would just automatically adjust their behavior if they know that being an unmarried parent would end in being treated as a sex offender. I mean, women would know.
This is it feels so Mott and Bailey. I can't explain what
does that mean? I'm afraid I don't understand.
Mott and Bailey is you put forward one position and then you retreat back to another position. I encourage you to Google the Mott and Bailey argument style. Because what it sounds like you're doing is you're doing the action versus the outcome, and you're pivoting back and forward in the argument. You're saying that the outcome of having children, and that those children, that they're more disposed to crime if they don't have a mother and a father, right? And that the way to stop this is to stop the sex. And when we say, well, if we're just concerned with the outcome, allow them to have birth control, and then the outcome is stopped. Well, then you retreat back to the concept of them having sex. That's the problem. It's one or the other. And my problem with this argument is that if all of these people could have birth control, then the act of sex doesn't have the consequence that you are concerned with to start with.
Well, what you've just described is what has been happening now. We have birth control all over the place, and they're all these women demanding abortions on demand. So it obviously hasn't stopped unwanted pregnancy, and it seems to have exacerbated it. So it seems that modern contraception has resulted in a greater demand for abortion than in previous times before modern contraception was invented.
Sure. I think if you look at the data sets on this, you'll see in America specifically, where we have conservative states that don't want to have sex education, we're going to have a far higher rate of unwanted pregnancies because we don't have sex education inside of school systems because they're afraid to talk about the subject, or their ideal of solving it is just no sex is the ideal of solving it, which is just not viable. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. You're trying to defeat one of the most rudimentary impulses of the human species, and best of luck with that.
Well, look, people do want to do a whole bunch of things that they probably know are not good for them. I mean, we sometimes get the urge to take things that don't belong to us or park in places that we're not supposed to park in. So, fundamentally, some laws, well, actually, all laws will be broken. So even if you say, it's a death penalty for murder, there will still be people who murder thinking they will get away with it. So all you can do is say, well, if you do that, it's against the law and you'll be treated like a criminal. And that might, make people, think twice about doing it. I'm certainly not saying it'll be completely eradicated, but it will have the effect of being a deterrent and discouragement.
Sure. I mean, you can discourage people from anything, but the problem is why would you discourage them against something? Why would you use any kind of force or any kind of penalty to discourage them against something that does not have a direct negative effect? And the other things that you mentioned are so different from the subject of sex, because you mentioned murder and you mentioned theft, which are a direct assault and an unwanted assault on the individual, whereas two consenting individuals having sex is not a direct assault on anyone. What you're talking about instead is you're arguing for that there is a residual effect that happens sometimes, even with birth control in its place. And then you're arguing a kind of a statistical thing, whether it happens more in areas where you have proper education or not. So this is extraordinarily different from arguing whether shooting someone or a murder or a theft, which we know is a direct damage to a person's property, their liberty, their right to live. Whereas two consenting adults, this is totally not the same thing.
I understand your position of it being a victimless crime. I used to think that, and until I realized that, once the majority of parents are unmarried parents, which means that the majority of children are well, you could say the illegitimate offspring of sex offenders, you will see that the morals of a society will keep lowering, and they will, be underachieving at school, not be considered desirable workers, be addicted to sex and drugs and rock and roll, and not be considered desirable employees by business organizations, who will then demand that their government let in all these immigrants that so many people find so frightening. So I'm just saying it's all linked, and now that people finally acknowledge the harm of it, it's very difficult to fix, because so many people are in that position of being an unmarried mother or an unmarried father, or a child of parents who were never married to each other. It will be very hard to fix, and now that I propose fixing it, everybody's sort of falling over themselves with shock and horror and disgust and fear.
Yeah, right. It's because of the way that you pose on fixing it. There's a saying that when the cure becomes worse than the disease, then that's time to stop. And it seems to me that your cure for this is far worse than any problem that is arising from it. And when you mention 100 lashes, there's a few different nations that are implementing stuff like this under the basis of Sharia, and for secular reasons, they're implementing this. One of them is Malaysia. And we have different countries that do this, but the 100 lashes thing in the Quran, there is no stipulation whatsoever as to how the lashes to be exercised. And some nations will do it barebacked, exercising of the 100 lashes, or some nations will do it on a shirt, and it's a smaller cane, and it's more of a public embarrassment thing. But there's no dictation.
That's what I propose.
I understand that, but your government, once you set it up, your government has no way to be regulated by that except self-imposed regulation on that, on whatever they decide. So if they think that that embarrassment is not enough, they simply do the shirtless thing and they leave them scarred, as many nations already do when they do the caning. And there's nothing in the Quran that dictates how severe this is or isn't.
I don't think any women are lashed in Malaysia. I really don't. I know there is some corporal punishment, but that's for male convicted prisoners. And I know in Singapore they do something, but it's not like the one they do in Aceh province, which is a caning. And I take your point.
Why would you mention women?
Because women would be the ones most likely to be caught holding the baby, so to speak. Men can always skip town if they find that, if it's discovered that they have knocked up some woman, but it doesn't particularly benefit a woman to arrive in a strange place on her own and husbandless and pregnant. So the consequences for a man and a woman are different. So I am factoring in, taking into account that most women will be suffering unwanted pregnancy under the system. So, but then they could just be more careful if they do want to do it.
So it seems like that there's a justice problem, just a sexual justice problem. It seems like the vast majority of the punishment of the act that happened between two people, you're going to have a singular side of this that is going to be the majority punished, almost in all cases. In your ideal of that, the man generally runs off and escapes the judgment to start with.
Well, yeah. So, but this should put women on notice that that they're not the ones. That they will always be the ones holding the baby, so to speak.
Yeah. And you don't particularly have a problem that seems unjust. I mean, if two people are doing the action, but one person always gets the penalty, you just think of it in terms of deterrent, but you don't think of it in terms of justice.
Well, I'm also thinking in practical terms, since men don't suffer from unwanted pregnancy, but they could still suffer from loss of reputation. And maybe, they might be forced into a shotgun marriage, which is an American expression. So these things used to happen and used to be dealt with, in a particular way. But biologically, we cannot escape, our biology.
Why the Quran at all, Claire? Why not us just make those laws and regulations ourselves? I mean, if you're going to use the word secular, which seems to have nothing to do with religious, we make our own secular laws for the purpose of, and because based on the success of other laws, that's why we would make the rules. So why go to these Stone Age religious laws to start with that seem extraordinarily out of date and immoral? Why not just make our own regulations?
Well, the thing is, if I made up a list of rules, people will just say, okay, you're just a silly woman. Nobody listens to you. How, what's the point of, making a whole list of rules that people will just dismiss? But if I say it's from God, if he exists, then people will take it more seriously. And also, I am attaching myself to a religious group, one of the more powerful religious groups in the world. So that would make sense, I think. Otherwise, people would just ignore my ideas.
So it seems like you're just kind of hijacking and using the authority of a God to implement and give the voice behind the authority, that this is almost like God backs this ideology, and that this is just something that you're using God pragmatically.
Because even atheists will say, "Oh, religion needs just mind control," and yes, it is mind control, and so even atheists already understand the concept of God and the nature and purpose of religion, which is for the regulation of our behavior and spiritual regulation as well, if we believe in it and take it seriously. Because people, want to feel that they will be protected from, evil and corrupt rulers, and if they suffer from injustice, they will be rewarded in the end if they do the right thing, and if they, someone evil hurts them, that evil person will also be punished. And this makes people more likely to do the right thing. But if you don't think that good will be rewarded or evil punished, then you won't be doing the right thing, even though you know in theory what the right thing is, which is to, accept the truth and exercise logic. And I fear that now people do not use facts and logic to win arguments. They use lies and prevarication and bribes and threats.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't they? If you're already promoting to lie to a people because you think it can control them more, why wouldn't they continue to use what you've already educated them to do? I think you're talking out of both sides of your mouth on this subject, Claire. You're saying that we use the God.
Have I told a lie?
If you're using a God because people need to believe that God to do a thing, you're just putting that God out there, that God backs this rule, that is a misrepresentation. They can behave. It seems to me that you think that people can only behave if they think that there's a God behind that, and you don't care. You don't mind putting that invisible God there to say, yes, that God also wants this and will punish you. It's a misrepresentation, whether you want to call it a lie or not.
Well, no, because I am agnostic, and obviously people who do really believe in God would want to obey him anyway. So the people I'm addressing are people who are not sure if God exists, who maybe don't think God exists, but whose behavior might be regulated by knowing that there's a law against something. So even if we don't agree with a law, we might refrain from breaking it because we don't want to be punished. Such as a parking regulation or a speeding ticket.
And you don't think education is more viable in fixing that rather than to teaching someone, yeah, your God's real and he wants you to do X? You don't think education is a more viable solution?
Well, all I'm going to say is, there's going to be a law against, all these things. And if you want to know the reason, it comes from the Koran. You may choose to believe in God. You might want to even. And I think most people, they half believe. One day they believe and the next day they don't. And it depends on, their mood and what they want to do on the day. And so all you have to say is, well, there's a law against it. So, if you do it, you're going to be treated like a criminal. And if you can justify the existence of that law, saying it's for the public good, then I just don't see the problem. Otherwise, doing the right thing is just optional, isn't it?
Let's put up some statistics on what we got going on in America. And I just wanted to make sure that you were familiar with this a little bit. Hold on. All right, so what we're looking at here, and I'll blow it up for just a minute so that we can see it a little better here. This is a statistics from our prison facilities. This is from a federal registry. This is from 2005, May 24th. This is from their internal survey of prisoners and their total numbers across the United States. And I just wanted to point out some statistics here on incarceration specifically. And when we look at Muslim incarceration here, our total numbers in the United States, we have 14,838 Muslims that are incarcerated in federal prisons that have been convicted of a federal crime. And they're in no small their 1% of the American population is Muslims. Yet what we have is an over a 19% representation inside of our prison facilities for committing crimes. So they believe the Quran, they completely believe that it is the case, and they know what the laws are, but they're still committing this. And then when we look at the statistics on atheists in the prison system, we have 113 in total in the entire penal facility. And the 2005 Pew Research polls shows 5% of the American population directly identifies as atheists, yet only 0.073% of people inside of penal facilities are atheists. So it seems to me people who don't believe in a God whatsoever can still seem to not commit federal offenses, whereas people who believe in gods regularly have very high criminal rates. And even amongst the Christians, if we're talking about Jewish rates or if we're talking about Catholics rates, I think they have a 19% American population. They're 19% of America, whereas 12.5 or somewhere in there is their representation in penal facilities. So it's fairly high, but nothing compared to Muslims. I mean, they're representing 19 or 20% of, or I'm sorry, I think it's 19% of, yet their population comparison, they're only 1% of America. So it seems to me that the argument of that believing these things are going to help you live a better life, it's just on the statistics, it's completely factually wrong.
Right. So do you have any information about what these crimes are?
It's
like
just federal
burglary
offenses.
or-
I don't have the statistics on this.
Okay,
It's just
okay.
federal prisons.
I think men of fighting age would tend to commit more crimes than men of not fighting age,
Mhm.
and that I think is something that's age related and gender related and biological, I suppose. I mean, men take more risks if they're young. They're probably going to get into trouble fighting about silly things, to do with their masculine pride or whatever.
Mhm.
So I think age is probably more a factor than religion, I would say, and probably the more Muslims of fighting age compared to the other religious groups.
So
But I'm only guessing.
you think it's an age thing? I mean, how would that not
Hmm.
apply to atheists? Do they not age or something? I mean, why would that exclude them? Why are they not getting arrested at least the 5% rate that represents their population in the US?
So, but you're saying non-Muslims are. Did you? What was the percentage of Muslims you said are in prison compared to?
Let's see. I just.
You said 14%, or was it 20?
There's a link right here on the screen that gives the breakdown. I'm sorry, I didn't put the Pew Research poll on there. You're going to have to do a little bit of math back and forward, but that math was already done on the page that I just put up there. Let me see if I can get it pulled up. Are you seeing this? This is on screen, hopefully.
I'm just seeing.
Yeah. So let's. Oh, Muslim. One moment. Let me get it back on the screen. Sorry to take up this time with that. Whoop.
No problem.
Let me get the other one.
But I think you said what 14%, or was it?
I don't want to misrepresent
I
it.
guess.
I'm sorry, my apologies. Muslims are 1% of the total population in the U.S., but they represent 9.6% of the inmates in the federal penal facilities. So a great disproportionate number. And I want to clear up all the numbers. Catholics represent 19% of the United States population, whereas they represent 12.5% of the federal penal facilities. The atheists are 5% of identified, refer to themselves, this is not the nuns, which make up 29%, but 5% consider themselves atheists, yet they represent 0.073% of the prison population as of the 2005 May federal prison survey.
I mean, I tend to be a little suspicious of these people in prison who call themselves, Christians suddenly.
Sure.
I'm sure, they probably want to, claim to be Christian in the hope of a lighter sentence or something. But at the time they committed their crime, I'm sure they weren't, feeling Christian or Jewish or, Buddhist or Hindu. So one has to wonder how much people who claim to be, Jews, Christians, or Muslims really believe.
Right. You think you got 19,000 Muslims?
They think, God was watching.
You think you got 19,000 Muslim people claiming to be Muslims inside of there when that only represents 1% of the American population, and there's still a minority in there? You think they're identifying themselves as Muslims for some other pragmatic reason, but that it's not true?
Well, the religion of mum and dad exerts a powerful influence on everyone. I think most people will just stick with the religion of mum and dad,
Okay.
whatever it is, because maybe you don't want to alienate your parents, or be considered a freak by your family or extended family. So you always stay with your inherited religion.
Right.
But as for actually believing it, we now have this expression: cultural Christian,
Hmm.
cultural Muslim. And it's all, well, I'm only claiming to be Catholic because mum and dad are, for example. So I don't know. But I'm talking about actual belief, because if you really did believe, then you probably would
But
you wouldn't be doing any of those
that's the Mott
things.
and Bailey stuff I'm talking about that you keep doing, Claire. That's what, like, you're talking about if you actually believe, but you're not trying to get people to actually believe this to start with. It's in your manifesto that you're just trying to implement the rules thereof. So if you're just implementing the
Mhm.
rules thereof, and that people are culturally a Muslim, then how does this differentiate, and how does this make this 19%, which is an overrepresented population, how does this make them not commit crimes?
Well, I think if the benefits of what I propose comes through later, and people go, hey, it's great, the crime rate has gone right down,
If it does.
divorce has gone right down, suicides, the everything, then they might think, oh, well, it's a good idea, it's working, perhaps there's something in this God thing after all. And then the government might, want to promote it. In fact, I find it very strange, because I hear all these references to America being one nation under God, and on your dollar bill it says, in God we trust, and most Americans seem to be atheists, or even militant
No,
atheists.
not at
So,
all.
people say one thing and do another.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, 5% is the population now as of the latest poll, and that's the highest numbers that it's ever been. So I'm not sure why you're saying most. I think that you're getting the circle and the crowd that you talk with.
5% of
The total
of
American
what? Sorry.
population, the total American population is identified by the Pew Research, which doesn't poll every single person, but they get statistics out of a lot of states, and they poll people. And the Pew Research is from their polling. And again, I don't know how large their last polling is, but Pew is the largest polling on the subject nationwide, worldwide, and they put it at 5% as of 2005, are identifying themselves as
Sorry,
atheists,
what is
that
5%?
are identifying
Eight.
themselves as atheists in these United States.
Well, I don't know. I find that when I talk to most people, they don't believe, but maybe it's just anecdotal. Most of my friends, the people I know, are not religious people. I like to think I know a fairly
You're
wide
talking about
sample
nuns.
of
People who
people.
say that they're not affiliated with a religion are not the same that are saying that I am atheist. I want to be clear. There are many people who are not affiliated with any religion. They have some sense of spirituality or any means in between. They just don't identify themselves as atheists. Now that number is as high, I think, as 29% is the last that I've seen, that they just marked none.
Well, I mean, I find that even when talking to religious people, that their ideas are, I'm supposed to be Christian, but I don't believe in the Trinity. Some might say, or you might even know a Jew who does all the things Jews are supposed to do, keeping the Sabbath, and then you realise that they're liberal, and cultural Christians, cultural Muslims. So I don't really know. From what I know of this friend I've known for quite a number of years, it seems he can't make up his mind. Some days he'll say he's agnostic, and other days he says he believes in God, and then yet another time he will deny the existence of God. I think people are fundamentally confused.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because we probably need to figure out, like, what model, I guess, or nation. This is one of the world population map reviews. They make a bunch of maps, and I had one of these that I wanted to do a comparison to their financial success and their crime rate success to their secularity. And I wanted to see what nation specifically did you think was a great model of Sharia law that you think is successful and is using that Sharia law. Do you have a particular nation that you think think that would be kind of the gold standard of who is implementing the Sharia law presently?
I hope it won't offend you too
No, go
much,
ahead.
but I would say Iran.
Iran. Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, fantastic. Then let's just look at some numbers. Well, I first want to look at the secular page, and then I'm going to pull up median income levels, and we can even look at crime rates and so forth. But I think when you look at secular nations, and the United States is falling on their secular rating here, but we have some of the most secular nations like Norway. We have Sweden. I think there's a few other in here. Estonia is one of some of the more secular nations. We have extremely high median income levels and extremely low crime rates in nations that are extraordinarily secular. So I don't know by what measure you are measuring their success, but it seems to me that we have nations that don't use religion at all, and their prosperity is very high, their individuality is very high, their education ratings are very high, and they just don't have the crime rates that you're concerned with about secularism. It's just not there. So I don't understand the enemy that you're fighting against. But I'll pull up the page with the a few other pages, and we can look at any of the rankings that you want. I just don't see the enemy that you seem to be seeing, I guess.
Well, I mean, the enemy I see is this anxiety about uncontrolled mass immigration that afflicts the West in particular. I mean, I don't know about how people in China or Iran feel about uncontrolled mass immigration, but I don't think it is such a high anxiety thing as it is in the West.
Right.
Because of just a culture war in the West, and all that stuff that went on in Minneapolis and ICE. And of course, the election of Trump himself, who promised to do something about immigration.
Yeah, just looking at Iran's median income average, and this is all, we can look at GDP and everything also, our GDP per capita, which is a good indicator. The reason that I bring that up is it's a good indicator of wealth quality, like how well people are living. And when you see in the United States, we are running a 19,300 GDP, which is one of the best. Canada's, not GDP, I apologize. This is median income, average per home income. I believe this is based on, it doesn't show it, does it? But what you have is, you'll notice right off the back, some of your most secular countries there are running high median incomes. And we can look at the crime rates also. Whereas nations like Iran, we're running just apps are, there you go, Iraq. Let's see, I seen Iran a moment ago. Iran's 4,300. We're just talking about bottom of the line poverty levels, that the individual people don't have the financial independence that secular nations have. So this is why it seems to me that my goal is the minimal amount of suffering and the maximum amount of happiness. And it seems like that you have a different goal, or that it's religiously tied, because in my goal, that seems to be more aligned with secular values.
Well, you seem to think it's all, written in stone, that if you have, if you're a poor country, you'll always be a poor country. But poor countries can become wealthy, and wealthy countries can become poor, can't they? And really, the whole idea of religion is that you compare the relative. Well, no, you undergo the exercise of comparative religion, and then you think, that the 5 world religions, and which one of these religions are doing well, and and higher status, and the others, and that's maybe a more accurate way of working things out than comparing their income, either individually or as a nation.
Sure. And I can tell you, I could talk on the subjects, because what I put on your from your blog thing there's so much to unpack there that I knew 1 hour wasn't even going to be enough to just scratch the surface of. But there's some things that you wind up doing in there that it seems to me are dishonest, like the IC codes. in the comments, and maybe I'll get them put on screen here, or maybe if y'all have the link, y'all can just look at it. But the IC codes on the race division, you said we're adopting Britain's IC codes, but the thing is, like, Britain does not use those IC codes except in quick reference descriptions. That's all they use them in. So if they're calling out radio calls or whatnot, they'll say they'll use those IC codes for a description of whether they're Arabic or they're this or that. But that's just a descriptor. Whereas you're using the IC codes to identify race for long-term implementation, and it being broadcasted on states radio to say what the successes and the failures of this race and that race are.
Well, it's me reaching out to, I guess, white nationalists who think races are religion, and it's white this and white that, and white nationalism, which they've now upgraded to Christian nationalism. So I guess they're kind of getting the message that, race cannot be their religion. They've got to, add Christianity to it. I don't see the problem, if people want to think that way, and that there's already categories of, differentiating people on race, and people want to make the comparison. I let them do it. But I'm just saying, if you you really need more than color to, bind your group together. And people,
why do you need to categorize them to start with? Is what I don't understand. I don't understand why you need to categorize.
Well, because there was this thing called white nationalism in America, and people like Richard Spencer and a few of these other people, and now you don't hear of them talking about white nationalism, because now they've become Christian nationalists, because they've got the message that it's not enough to say white. They've got to use some ancient branding to
Claire, that's not at all answering the question. Why do you think that these races needed to be divided, or we need to have clarification on the individual races? What does that have to do with what white nationalism are doing, and that their shift in using religion? Well, I mean, I don't understand why you need to categorize individuals in this model. Like, why do they need to be separated?
Well, it's out of respect for my streaming partner, Vincent Bruno. He's a beyondist. I don't know if you've heard of it.
That. Yep, I have. And I actually looked at the book. I had a link here, but I don't think we're going to have time to cover everything. But I think it deals with the subject of evolution in a very similar way to some of the ideologies of Adolf Hitler. I very much do think that it's problematic. And I think that he wants to isolate the individual groups. The Beyondism individual, what's his name? I forget that, right? He just wrote 2 books on the subject.
Raymond Cattell.
That's him, Raymond Cattell, that writes this book about the individual evolution of races, and that they have to have social cohesion inside of the racial group. I think it's an extraordinarily just racist nonsense is what I think it is, that is pushing evolution of some supremacy.
But people, there will be people who are obsessed about race, and they think their race is better, or some other race is better than they. So I mean, I just see no harm. People want to play Olympic Games based on race. Well, let them. Because Vincent has been so helpful in compiling this blog spot, which is his, by the way. I thought I'd kind of incorporate Beyondism to secular Koranism, and also with a view of getting him to support secular Koranism as a gay married man. But he has a few issues about it.
Which obviously, I mean, his marriage would be dissolved when secular Koranism takes over, as your 5th rule.
But I have this thing called a domestic partnership, which will be open to all. If
it'll be a domestic partnership, but it won't be a marriage, right? It won't have the same recognition of.
No.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to cover some of this IC stuff, because this is one of the bigger things that I had with the races, and what we track. Beyondism in action. Cattell's Beyondism demands we measure groups' race here for educations. Who's topping schools? I see 1's whites. I see 4 Asians. Employment. which groups hold steady jobs. IC3, black lagging behind question. And then when we get into why it matters, personal outcomes, your IC code status signals your odds, dash education opens doors, crimes shuts them. Immediately whenever I read this, the reason that I said that you're pro-racism, the reason that I dropped that heavy bomb is because whenever I read this, this reads like you are opening doors and shutting doors holistically for a group based on the performance of that group. Like this is the definition that what's his name? Martin Luther talked about, judging me by the color of my skin and not the actions of my countenance and whatnot. You're holistically opening and shutting doors for a group.
Well, people will be categorized according to their religion as well. There will be registers of race and registers of religion, so you can cross-reference you know, the performance of different groups, and obviously you can be, you know, a different color for different religions, and you know, maybe some sense will be made out of all the data that will be ultimately collected. Just because I, you know, allow people to identify themselves by race or religion doesn't mean that I'm racist. I vigorously deny the accusation.
Sure. But like I said, if you're creating opportunities, I mean, let's look up at the definition. I have a problem with the C. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by individuals, communities, or institutes against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial ethnic group. And the reason that I mention that is because whenever I hear opening and shutting doors based on the status and performance of their group, this seems definitionally, Claire, to be racist. It's just by definition.
Oh, just by talking about it, we're being racist?
No, well, not at all. Not at all. But if you're talking about giving out people opportunity or curtailing their opportunity based on them being a part of a group, yes, that meets the check mark definition of atheist. Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly not proposing to curtail anyone, but I think there should be freedom of contract. And if you want to hire certain people or not hire certain people as a company, well, it should be up to you. Instead of it being enforced, but you know, certain races will have, you know, be seen to be better at certain things than other races. So, I mean, you know, let the employer decide, and let the, you know, the wisest employer prosper. I'm certainly not going to be prescriptive about these things.
Right. Yeah. What were some other subjects that we needed to catch? Did you want to address any of the other allegations or anything that I brought up on objective ethics, or more of your model to outline?
Well,
we have 10 minutes before we get folks on stage.
Yes, you were saying that I'm a bit of a Nazi, and I was hoping you would explain how. I haven't said anything anti-Semitic as far as I know.
Right, it has nothing to do with that. You can pick a different race and put it in place. The reason that I mentioned that this is very similar to Nazism is because this was among his first manifesto, was to categorize people by not only their race and their ethnicity, but also by their religion. And even whenever we had prisoners inside of concentration camps, he wanted individual placards stamped on them so that he could know quickly and identify what religion that they were associated with. So this is why it's so reminiscent to me that we have IDs that are going to let you know what their race is, and IDs that are going to let you know what their religiosity is specifically, so that they can be handled by the larger institutional government.
But there's so many forms of discrimination. I mean, you know, why fill in an application form if you want a job? You know, the people, your potential employer, you know, want all this information from you in order to predict your behavior. They want to know your age, where you went to school, whether you went to university, etc., because, they're obviously looking for the ideal employee, and if they think they've found one, that they're looking for, maybe problems, whether you're married, not married, gay, whatever. So, I suppose I don't
Should
have a
I
problem.
predict your chance? Should I predict your chance of committing a felony based on the 19% to the 1% ratio? If we have 1% of an American population that is Muslim and 19% is in prison, should I try to calculate what your specific chance of doing a crime is based on those statistics, or based on your individual actions that you specifically have done in the past?
I just wouldn't be able to stop you if you wanted to do that. You see, I mean, I wouldn't be able to
No,
stop
but you don't have to help it and usher it in as a government to enforce that, to reinforce that. Rather, you should be able to back the ideal of people judging an individual based on their own actions, not the actions of others or of a group.
But that's the reason why you have these application forms, and where your date of birth and place of birth, and maybe they need to know your marital status and how many children you have already, to predict your behavior. And maybe they're looking for somebody who's single, or looking for somebody who's married. Why would you stop your employer from doing that if their position
The
is
bigger
suitable for
question is,
somebody
Claire, why
married?
the hell do they need that? We operate in America regularly with that, and we have very successful finances. All the success of these companies are built on the back of people that they don't know what the hell their marital status is, what their religion is, or anything. And yet we have built empires that are extraordinarily successful. But all of these employees, they don't know what their religion is. How can they even possibly succeed? Yet they do.
Is there
Claire.
an American president who calls himself atheist? I think there is some level of discrimination there, because it seems Americans are not going to put up with having a president who says, well, I'm a communist, or, whatever. He still has to be Christian.
You've shifted from an employee to the president of the United States.
Yes.
You've been shifted from someone who is doing a laborious job to someone who is running the nation. This is extraordinary.
If you're looking for a laborer, you probably want a man, right? And then you're going to say,
what the job is.
Discrimination.
Claire, it depends on what the job is, but anyone who is capable of doing the job, that is all that should be the concern.
Yes, and it's up to the employer who will, decide whether he wants a female plumber or not, or a female or a male teacher for his, all boys, all girls school. I don't know. But I think at some level you have to let people do these things again, and I think they will feel liberated from DEI, which is in a way a kind of religion that is oppressive. It's even called woke, isn't it? It's called this woke religion. So it's all political, and I'm just saying I'm going to be honest about it, and let people kind of work it out themselves, and not even particularly prevent them from doing that.
So DEI is oppressive, but telling everybody a religion that they may not want to hire those people to start with. Let's take, for example, Muslims. If you are 1% of the population, you may have extraordinary biases in these United States that don't want to hire Muslims when they put on there. And if they can decide that they don't want to hire you, then they just don't hire you based on the fact that you're Muslim. And it might have no representation of the group's behavior. It may have simply to do with their religiosity and their own preferences. And they show biases against you that are not fair. They are not warranted in any way, shape, or form. But it doesn't seem to me that you're concerned with the fairness of how those corporations and those entities treat. You're more concerned with the fairness that those entities are treated with, rather than the fairness that they treat with.
Well, people will be choosing their sex partners, their business partners for all kinds of reasons that I have no control over, and they may be right, or they may be wrong. So I'm just going to leave it open, and I think most people will feel liberated from DEI. I think they would prefer it. And I
most corporations, I don't doubt that they will. I think the mass population, they're not going to prefer it unless they are, I guess, white males specifically that might, or a group that might benefit most from the biases that corporations are going to implement. That group would be happy about it, but the minorities, not at all.
Well, I mean, there's so many kinds of discrimination now, like discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and
Sure,
age and disability. I
sure.
mean, there's just so many things that okay, I don't know, but I'm saying there should be freedom of contract because, in a way, I am a liberal, and there should be freedom of expression, freedom of association, and the right to property, and the right to categorize people and discriminate, because it's an exercise of thought. So I think we've all been victims of people not liking us for reasons that we think are unfair, and we've also hated people for reasons that turn out to be wrong, and maybe we've admitted it, but we've just taken a dislike to somebody just because of the way they look or something. So or because of their class, or ethnic or national origin. I don't know, but I think we should be able to do these things in a civilized way, and allow people to make their mistakes if it is indeed a mistake.
I don't think there's a civilized way to be racist or sexist or otherwise. I hate to say that, but I wish we did have more time. I am going to do the open panel just because we are going to stay on the format. I know, unfortunately, we have not even touched the subject of government-owned slaves, nor have we touched the allegation that I made of just anti-freedom of speech and so forth. I know you have championed that you are pro-speech, but I think we have had constitutional rulings from constitutional governors. Just a quick note on it, and I'll let you give a response, and then we'll open the channel. On the subject of free speech, I think you had a government-ran channel that's a propaganda channel, that would be the only one, and that they would kind of control the narrative. I also have some issues with the gay people not having freedom of expression in public, that they would not be able to display that. No gay bars would be able to have advertisement and things like this that we traditionally say are protected by the freedom of speech. You would curtail all of those things, yet still champion that you are, in fact, a freedom of speech. And I don't see it to be the case at all. But I'll let you respond, and then I'm going to bring some people on stage.
Well, I knew a gay man who, I met a gay man at a party, and he talked about his lover as his best friend, and I thought, oh, that was so nice and so charming and so inoffensive, and I just don't see the problem with that, and I don't know if you've heard of this language called Polari, which is an English kind of language that gay people would use when homosexuality was very when it was still a criminal offense. So I'm saying, people can, okay, it doesn't have to say gay bar. Locals can probably, know that, some gay men go over there and, discreetly nudge, wink, wink, we're gay, we go there, kind of thing. There will be,
Right.
haunts for, certain kinds of people.
They can get it out. They just have to have their
discreet about
special
it.
secret language, very discreet. Gotcha. Yeah, I don't. It's not satisfactory to me, but I'll leave it be.
I mean, there's no need to say gay bar or gay village. That's also in your face.
We wouldn't want that. Any guests want to come on in? You're welcome in. We got Simos. I do want to let y'all know, if we're starting to have a lot of people try to come onto the stage and want to have their moment to speak, we will start cycling people out if it gets real popular. I know a lot of people did wanted to come and say their mind. But Simos, what's happening, man?
Hello. Yeah, okay. So I was a little disturbed by a couple of things, which I just wanted to dive into a little deeper to make sure that I didn't have a misunderstanding. Okay, so you said, let me just say this. So do you think that two young lesbians should be allowed to hold hands, I don't know, kiss in public, say? Excellent.
Not kiss in public,
Okay.
but hold hands, yes.
Not kiss in public.
Well, and not even straight people will be allowed to kiss in public.
I see.
So I'm not
Interesting.
discriminating against anyone, huh?
Yeah, everybody gets discriminated against. I got you.
But men can hold hands if they want, if they must.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's something. That's something. Okay. And do you advocate for the full use of the niqab for women?
No, no, but
No. Well, it's in your avatar, so
I
it's a fair
know, I
assumption.
know, but I'm just kind of, using the brand of Islam. I don't wear one in real life. I did
Right.
have one
Okay.
when I was doing comedy.
Okay. Okay. So you'd say it's fair to allow people to dress exactly as they please in public, within the
I'm not
bounds of
actually disturbed
within the
about
bounds of
niqab.
within the bounds of secularity. So if they want to wear it, that's fine. If they don't want to wear it, if they want to show their hair, that's perfectly all right.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. And they can wear hats there. So I don't see, right. That goes against what you've already said. Like, you said that Iran was the perfect use of Sharia.
Well, not perfect, but I'm saying, that they managed to, get their country back with
Yeah.
Sharia, right? So, they've done better
No, but,
than,
but
the
yeah.
Sunni kingdoms.
Right, I see. So really, you're saying you prefer Shia brand of Islam, yeah?
Well, I guess, the Persians are an older civilization, and they're not just, desert Arabs who are, put there as puppet kings by the Western imperialists under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. So, the Persians are rather
I've got one more
smarter.
question. Yeah, okay. So there you go. But I'm just saying that the things that are done in that particular country under Sharia law, of course, are much worse, much worse than any Christian or secular state by such a long way. I
Like
mean,
what?
like for instance, recently a girl was raped, and when the police came along to the scene, they arrested her for showing her hair, and
Oh, I
then
haven't heard of
as
that.
as a result, she was then raped in prison multiple times by the guards before being executed.
Are you sure that's not just Western propaganda,
No, that certainly
gearing
isn't Western
people up into
propaganda.
nuking Iran?
No, that came from somebody on the internet who was Iranian who knew the girl.
Right. Well,
And
I'm not
worse
aware
than
of the
that, actually.
story, but I'm sure all
Worse
kinds
than
of
that.
horror stories exist in all
Yeah,
countries.
absolutely. You know what they do to homosexuals under Quran, under Sharia
Sure.
law in the Quran. Do you?
Oh, I'm
Hang on,
sure
are you
that's all
aware of
just
that, Claire?
Western propaganda.
Are you aware of what they do? I mean, there's video evidence for this, of course.
Oh, you mean the hangings from cranes?
Okay,
Mm.
yeah, that as well, yeah.
Let's
Well, I'd
get some
have
words
to.
from a
No,
deconverted man here. I'm
can I?
sorry, D-Man. Yeah, I know, but I haven't even said hey to him since he's been in here. He's been in here a good 5 minutes. Deconverted man,
Okay.
how's it going, man? D-Man, you got a working mic?
Well,
right,
anyway,
go ahead, Simon,
my
till he gets
my
out.
point being, my
There he
point
is. All
being,
right.
my point
Hello.
simply being is that if you're advocating for Sharia law, then you're going to have to change the Sharia law, right? And if you're
Well,
doing that,
it will
it's
have
not
to be
Sharia law
interpreted.
anymore.
It's just a matter of interpretation,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
and
But
who
like,
controls it?
they literally do. They
the
literally
the
do
last
these things even in the mild countries that take Sharia law,
Uh,
like
uh,
Indonesia.
I'll tell you who controls it. The last person that you want to control it. That's who's going to control it. The very last person that you'd ever want to be in that position is going to be that position, and you're
Well,
going to
the
find
U.S.
yourself.
Supreme Court
You're
will
gonna
control
be
it.
quiet while I'm talking, and you're gonna find yourself unable to speak on all, let alone the internet. You're not going to have any freedoms because you're a woman.
It
You're
doesn't
going to be
say
bound
that.
to
It doesn't say
you're going to be
that.
bound to your husband.
It's
Don't
only the
interrupt me
New
while I'm
Testament
speaking. It wasn't
that
done yet.
says.
I'll let you know when it's time to talk. I'm speaking here.
Let's be
Well,
proper.
I will contradict you when it's obviously
No,
wrong.
you will be silent while I'm speaking.
Let's be proper.
That's how that goes. Yeah. So you say secular, and that's a great word. I love the word secular. And to have a secularized society is to have a progressive society. But it seems to me that you just want all the worst parts of this religion without some of the other religious aspects. And that's not progressive, so that's not secular. So what happened to your logic to enable you to do that? Did you just discard your logic, or did you ever have logic at all to begin with? Now you may speak.
Claire, go ahead and give us a rebuttal on that.
There's no point responding to a rhetorical question.
How was that rhetorical?
If you ever had logic at all,
I have
sound
already
fairly
explained how secular Koranism works to Robert, but perhaps you weren't listening. So I said,
I wasn't here.
Okay, I'm happy to repeat it for you and the others. So whether you're atheist or not, you would still want murder, robbery, and rape to be forbidden. So, yeah.
We don't need the Quran to do that, though, do we?
Well, we need the Quran for standards of sexual morality.
I have
standards
a good
of
use.
sexual morality. I'm sure you don't care about that. You're not a
Yeah.
married father, are you?
It's irrelevant. You don't
I
need the
think it
Quran.
is,
You just need secular laws. That's it. If you want a secular thing, then discard the whole Quran. You don't need it.
I've also
although I do have some uses for it, like toilet paper.
Hey, D-man. She let you talk the whole time, man. She didn't interrupt.
Well, he's not saying anything new. It's the the usual Islamophobic crap.
No. I'm not afraid of Islam. I know it's evil. I'm not afraid of you at all. You have no power.
If he's actually asking a question,
you have
instead
no
of
logic.
making a speech, I'd be happy to answer the question, but he's not.
You can't have secular Quran that's encoded.
It's my interpretation of the Quran.
All right, your interpretation.
Let's change gears a little bit
And it would
here.
be perfect for America, because it won't infringe the First Amendment, which forbids government establishment of religion.
No. It has all of the religion, though, Claire. It does have all of the religion. It just has.
It uncompromisingly supports the First Amendment. Which is what these Muslims do not say. They don't even understand that, these Muslims.
You've created a new form of BS, and you've eaten it with a silver spoon. Good job. Not on my watch, though. I will do everything in my power to resist, repel, and refute you with all the power that I have.
I'm with you, D-man. I just I think let's address the individual issues rather than.
Well, there's no logic to address, so I don't know what to say. This is pure insanity, but I mean, people like this exist, so
let's try to deal with them on the best logical basis that we can. Let's try not to do that.
Well, she doesn't have any logic.
That's Phyllis Sober. The reason that I tried to get, hey, D-man, thanks for stopping by, man.
I'm not everyone's cup of tea,
It's all right. Phyllis Sober, the reason that I was trying to get you to stop by was I understand that you used to be Muslim, man. If you're interested in popping in here, I'd love to hear some of your comments on this. Anyway,
I had another line of inquiry which I'd like to just press for a moment, which was I found personally disturbing. Okay, so you're talking about documenting people's race, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not my idea. It's really Vincent Bruno's, but I don't see the harm of it if people want to, assess the performance of the different races.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not what do you call what's the expression, a deal breaker. I'm not that bothered about it. It's not even my idea.
You're happy to endorse the idea, is that right?
Yeah, I'm happy to incorporate the principles of beyondism, which is a pet idea of Vincent Bruno, my streaming partner, whose blog spot it is.
I see.
But it's really
Right.
his idea.
Okay, so you can't really speak to that idea. You just you're kind of blindly following
He's the
it,
beyondist, not me.
right? But you're still following it. Is that right?
No, I see no harm in incorporating these ideas, because there will be race obsessed people who wonder whether yellow people are better than brown people or black people, and and all kinds of things. It's like, yeah, let them do it if they want.
Well, if they want. So there's going to be something on there saying, no, I refuse to be addressed as my race.
Yeah,
That's
so
okay too.
yeah,
In this
because
beyondism stuff.
yeah, but I mean, obviously, people look just by visual recognition, you'll recognize somebody as being yellow, brown, white, or black.
Oh, right. So
White
how
or
many
black,
races?
right?
How many
So
races do you think there are?
I think there are only four. Main
Right.
ones.
Okay.
So
what about people that are mixed race? Can they identify as either?
yes, they could, but it's more an objective measurement. Right. I mean, people can say, well, I may be black, but I feel white inside, and, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Or my parents are Catholic, but I feel Protestant, I'm Jewish, but I feel Gentile, or vice versa. I mean, I don't know. The subjective is, something I wish to avoid, because then you get it tied up in all kinds of knots. So
Okay.
I prefer objective data.
So, right. So if I were to tell you that something like, race is just a social construct and is as subjective as whether what the flavor of ice cream you like is, you would disagree with that, would you?
No, because race is obviously, visual and objective. But I would expect you more to say, gender is a social construct.
Do you think gender is a social construct?
No, because it's biological, and obviously, higher levels of aggression in men, is consistent with men being assigned the roles they have because of their greater physical strength, making them more suitable to be, manual laborers and soldiers and that kind of thing.
Okay. I mean, again, I think you don't really understand science very well, because, of course, as we know, the genomes can be very varied amongst the human population. And likewise with race, there's very little to tie any of the ideas that you're talking about to actual races, right, that don't have some kind of secular understanding, right? So we know exactly why, for instance, that some particular groups of people, right, suffer from, I don't know, poverty, say. We know that can be institutionalized as racism. And that's part of the problem that I see with what you're trying to do here, or what this guy is trying to do. I mean, he's clearly trying to be racist. I mean, I can't say it fairer than that, in my opinion, of course. And that means that collecting this kind of data, right, on what people have to put down, right? It's not what they identify, right? They have to put down, you're saying, what is the objective fact that you have, right, for them being a particular race, even though, as I say, they might be mixed race, in which case, who knows what they should put down, right?
Well, they would be identified by the official concerned. So, the person looking at you will say, you're IC1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
So once again, it's not how they identify. It's even though it is
at birth is actually what it said on here.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, it's again definitionally racist, as I think Robert pointed out. So I think actually what what your words coming out of your mouth when you answer a question like, no, gay men can quite happily hold hands, and I think nobody should kiss in public, right? These kind of things. This is all just retrograde steps and backward steps towards the days when authoritarians ruled the world, right? And I think that's a problem. The more you undermine democracy, the more likely it is that we're going to behave in such ways as to try and pat ourselves on the back and identify as much as possible with the ruling class. And I just think that is such a negative and bigoted view of how the world should run that I'm absolutely disgusted, as always, by anybody that comes on and goes, oh, race is just, race is objective. And therefore, there are certain groups that just based on their statistics and how well they do in society should be treated in X, Y, Z way and shouldn't be given equal opportunity, which I think is the hallmark of America in some ways. You can become president even if you're lowly born, right? So I just don't understand. I mean, you're clearly not American. I mean, clearly, you're certainly not pro-United States anyway, because you're just literally trying to go against definitionally what the founding fathers are trying to set up the state for in the first place.
No, I'm trying to be faithful to the objectives of the founding fathers.
Maybe you should go to Iran and try and live under Sharia law before you start preaching that it's for the best in a secular country like United States.
Well, it's America that's causing all the problems and starting World War III. So my prime concern is the US of A.
Yeah, but I don't think the US of A is hanging gay people from cranes. I don't think they're raping virgins.
They're starting World War III, which is rather worse, and have destroyed countless countries and mass murdered lots of people.
I think that's an extremist view to say you're starting World War III when there's been rumours of
I didn't make it up.
Well, you are making it up, quite frankly.
I mean, people have been talking about
the attack happened on that, but this is not World War III. Clearly, I mean, these attacks is not the first time that this has happened. It's not even the first time that America has bombed Iran. And I want to be clear: I in no way support what is happening presently, and I don't think that it went through the Congress. And I think it's skirting around the procedure that was met by the founding fathers to start with. So I don't want to back that pony to start with, but I do want to say, it's the red hat people of which you are presently wearing that has backed this thing the whole way and is why it's happening. So you can continue to sport that red hat all you like, but it's that red hat movement that's causing this and not the people that you're speaking to.
Sorry, what was there a question? I was a bit distracted. I hope it's okay for me to give the link to Vincent Bruno so he can come and defend his idea.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I did read that in chat.
And so, in short, I guess I'm saying that this idea of yours, and I've heard of this idea of yours for some time now. I mean, it must be at least 6 or 7 years you've been banging this drum, if not longer. I would have thought 10 years, maybe.
Yes. I mean, I first conceived of it in 2009. But I mean, to my surprise, I don't. There isn't even a rival idea that's come to my notice.
Well, that's because it's a contradiction. That's because literally those two words put together are a contradiction. That's why nobody takes it seriously or hasn't taken it seriously since I've been on the internet anyway.
Are there any ideas that people take seriously apart?
Yeah, I mean, somebody else is here, so I'll shut up for now. There are more ideas, but
I'm sorry, I was just trying to get that off the stage.
That's okay.
Phantom, how goes it, man?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
Very well, very well. What's your thoughts on all this, man?
It's pretty wild. I heard that you were going to go into the state-owned slaves thing. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, and we can get into that, but I do want to. We got a gentleman that did want to come in, I guess, to some degree, and defend the the position on the races. I'm sorry, I'm going to learn how to manage this professionally one day here. Vincent, how goes it, man?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Okay, so all I know is that you're discussing Claire's blog, which I helped make with her,
Sure.
Under her direction. It was AI. Thank you. It was AI that did all the heavy work, but I helped her with the prompts.
Mhm.
But yes, part of it, she did adopt some of the Beyondist framework. So did she explain to you what Beyondism is?
I've read the title on the gentleman's book, and I do know that he backs the idea of like social groups, being able to stay cohesive inside of social groups, and the evolution happening inside of those social groups to promote natural selection.
Yeah, so differentiation between groups, so that they're different culturally, genetically, so that natural selection can choose for the best genes and moral system. So it's an ethical derivation system, and it's also a eugenic program where the eugenics are built in, like, okay, observation, what works, what doesn't work, rather than, some kind of, some other form of selection. But it's an ethical derivation system, yeah.
Yeah, the problem that I have with it is that the people are not just a genetic set that is being rewarded or disadvantaged. They're actual people, not just a genetic set.
Well, it goes with the individuals too. No, but it works on the individual too, because the group only advances based on the individual, right? Because within the group, something new is going to arise because there's a novel individual inside that group.
Sure, but the problem is, along with a state-ran media that has only one propaganda outlet, that they announce who's successful and who's not successful in this, that, or the other, is whatever organization or group that is running that government gets to determine whether they allow that or not. And the problem is, even if they're announcing achievements or degradations in a group, even if they are announcing those, they could be announcing these things completely incorrectly or biased in some way, and we have no corrective system whatsoever because it's a one-party government. There's no other outlets of propaganda that they control the narrative. So even if they're lying about the performance of an individual group, just take it. There's literally nothing that you can do about that with this autocracy that she's wanting to form to start with. But even if it were true that these performances are happening in the group, then what you're getting, Vincent, is you're getting individual people that are being treated on the basis of the behavior of the group. And the basis of the behavior of the group can be for many other reasons. It can be for education, that group doesn't have the same education, or they're not getting the same opportunities. Maybe they're not getting the same employment opportunities because bias is against that group because of a high crime rate spike. And now bias is against that. It's causing poverty in that group because they can't get jobs, which is causing it to spike more. And then you're just getting this runaway effect of a group, and you don't have a way to stop it.
Okay. One thing I want to say, Beyondism is different than secular Koranism. Beyondism was started by Raymond Cattell, who was a psychologist, and he did not necessarily say that you needed a one-party state. Claire has taken parts of Beyondism, excuse me, and incorporated them into her own party. So she just basically simplified it and said that we're just going to break down everyone based on race codes. So you're black, you're white, you're this, you're that, and religion codes. You're Shinto, you're Buddhist, you're Jewish, you're this, you're that, and see how everyone performs. And, it's a watered down version of Beyondism, but I don't want you to think that under Beyondism you have to have a one-party state or that it's an autocracy or anything. Yeah, no, it's different. It's different than what Claire's proposing.
But you can see where the two will work off of one another to create serious problems that cannot be created, they can't be fixed. Because if the government is saying, well, the party that whatever the majority of the government is, their C, whatever the code is, and they're saying, well, the other C codes they're not performing well. We literally don't even have a corrective system to say that that's not true, because we get false information right now from our government, that we get the commander-in-chief that says things that try to represent statistics that are just factually not correct. And what we have is we have other outlets that fact check that and say that is not the case. And under this system, we wouldn't even have that. So when we have the performance charts of these individual races, we have a group that can get, they're the ones that's determining the outlet of information. And it's already got a problem, I think, all by itself. But compiled with this, it's just disastrous.
Well, I mean, I don't see what's disastrous about allowing a bunch of people who are genetically related to have a piece of property where they interbreed and create a culture that works for them so that they can be observed to see what works best, but there's individual rights inside that culture, and it's built into the cake that the individual matters, because changes don't happen. Genetic cultural changes don't happen throughout the whole population overnight. It starts with one individual who has come out different than the others, and then, it propagates. So, I mean, these nightmare scenarios, just because we're going to allow people to congregate with each other the way they want to and to breed the way they want to, and that we're going to observe different ways of lifestyles, and that different people in these different colonies are going to come to their own conclusions about what works genetically and culturally for them through observation. I don't see doomsday from that. No.
Yeah, let's not bait and switch the word allow with enforce, because these are two different things. Because if you're enforcing a separation of groups, that's not the same as saying we're just allowing them. These are diametrically opposed.
No, but this is Claire. You're mixing up Claire's ideology and beyondism. They're not the same thing.
I understand. I'm just saying what we have on offer is both of these. And I'm not arguing against this individual's ideology. And if he wanted to come on and talk about his ideology separate, but since this has been incorporated into Claire's paradigm, into her religious structure, I think that we should point out the problem of her ideas that are already there that are now working with this incorporation. It's going to cause serious problems.
All right. Well, okay. I think secular Koranism by itself will cause serious problems, but I don't think beyondism. Well, first of all, I don't subscribe to beyondism fully. There are parts of beyondism that there are elements. First of all, people aren't forced to live together based on, if a bunch of Africans want to come together and start a colony somewhere, that's not forced. That's allowing them. That's allowing them to do what they want to do. But there were elements to his religion that I don't agree with, that did have forceful elements to it. But I just support. I take a reformed version. She took a reformed version too, but she took it in not the best way. Whereas I softened it for myself. I softened the version of beyondism for myself, whereas she kind of harshened it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate your input on it, Vincent.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just ask a couple of questions there?
Sure.
Thanks. Is that all right, Vincent? I'll ask you a couple of questions about beyondism specifically, rather than Claire's ideas. Well, just to say, I mean, I would argue that. Okay, so first of all, I think that maybe America is a closed colony to some sense, right? Yes, you have immigrants, etc., but the vast majority of people over the 200 years or so that it's been in existence have been fairly monocultural. So I just think that maybe that's already been going on already. And so I don't see why you would need to then segregate further.
No, see, this is what everyone tells me, that Catel's vision is already enacted, and that he was fretting about his religion not taking hold because it's already taken hold. This is not what's going on. There are not tightly contained ethno-states that are becoming, there's not tightly contained ethno-states that have that are interested in breeding themselves into a particular type and aligning their culture with their genes, and that everyone is doing this around the world in unison in order to see whose system and genes work best. That's not happening anywhere on this earth. There's no nothing. It's not happening.
No, I mean that's demonstrably false, by the way. If you just take some European populations, you'll find, say, the Dutch population is the average highest height for males and females, by the way. So clearly that is a genetic trait.
No, it is, and they're not protecting
it's
it.
subjective. It's subjective. And
are they protecting it? Is it an ethno state? Are the Dutch saying that we're going to breed a Dutch race with a Dutch culture and preserve it forever and ever? Are they saying that?
Well, they're not, because they're not idiots, clearly.
Well, okay. Well, I don't know what's so idiotic about taking a race and saying, hey, we want constant improvement, cultural and genetic improvement. We want our cultures to align with our genes. Let's observe other cultures, what they're doing. Let's look what the Swedes are doing. What's happening in Zambia. What's happening here. It would be better, these outcomes, these studies would be better if the cultures were more granular and the people were extremely related to each other, and the culture was a true expression of the genetic urges of a tightly related group of people. No, that's not happening, and I don't say why that's idiotic to say, let's observe other people's genes and cultures to see what works best, while preserving ourselves in a fluid way where we can advance, where we can change if we need to, but not just willy-nilly breed, bring everybody in, everybody crossbreed and become, no.
Well, we could selectively breed if we wanted to. If we didn't even have to selectively breed, we can affect our own genetics if people weren't so religiously afraid of changing our own genetics. But
we can do that too. But I think we have to keep the natural system up until we don't know all the ramifications of genetic engineering. And so I do think that we need some natural bloodlines to be kept alive that have not been.
So the natural system is already working, evolution, and so again.
Okay, no, this is your opinion. Your opinion is that it's not working enough for me. It's not tightly contained enough. It's not scientific enough. It's not okay. Where is their grain? Okay, where is their grain? Okay, I support personally. I support the genes and culture becoming so granular that you use polygamy and a certain degree of incest in order to standardize the population, their culture and their genes, so that where are populations being standardized? Where do you see standardization of population?
Well, if you didn't know, everybody outside Europe is pretty closely genetically matched. I mean, to say that this isn't happening is just daft, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, I don't think. Okay, you think it's happening enough? It's not happening.
I think what you're confusing is people's the social contracts of race and mainly skin color to do with and that you think that that's probably genetically a genetic variable which is important in people's productive lives or whatever.
And you obviously don't. You obviously don't.
Well,
so then, you're non-hereditary. Okay, so you're not a hereditarian. So I mean, but if you're not a hereditarian, I didn't know I was speaking to non-hereditarians.
Right. So how does that make a difference then?
Let me curtail some of this.
Okay.
Let me curtail some of this.
If I could just finish my sentence, then that would be lovely.
Let's wrap it now because we're supposed to be talking with Claire.
Let this guy have a final say or whatever. So I think the danger here is that, and again, I don't know what parts you mean hereditarian. I gave you an example of hereditarianism. Right, in Holland.
No, okay, it sounds like me to what you're saying is that you don't like, I know, but wait, you said, okay, go ahead, finish.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think I've already given you an example of that. And my problem is that once people start trying to go down this eugenics path, as has been shown in history, and certainly European history, they often then turn over to saying, right, well, this is not happening fast enough. We need to go down the dysgenic route. And I think that that's pretty scary when it comes to a
okay, well, we're not doing that. We've eliminated any.
I just can't get to the end of a sentence, can I? All right,
Okay.
go ahead. I think it's a disgusting and vile.
Okay. Well, we have.
I think it's a disgusting and vile.
Okay. Well, I don't know what we're doing so disgusting. I don't know what. I don't know what about. I don't know what's disgusting. What's disgusting? You haven't told me what's disgusting that we're doing.
Yeah,
So what? We're allowing people. Okay. What's your problem with a colony of Chinese people going onto a mountaintop and starting a commune and saying we want to have a Confucius Chinese society for other people to be a beacon for other people to learn from? What's so disgusting about that?
It's not enforced.
No, yeah, it's not enforced. Nobody would force them to do this.
Okay, so if you want to, you and your mates, right, you want to go off, well, maybe not you, from what Claire has said, but somebody that has similar ideas to you, but is heterosexual, might go off. If they want to go off and do that, I think they've already tried. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Okay, well, we'll say, okay, now it doesn't work. But now you set the goalpost. First it was disgusting, now it doesn't work. So it's not disgusting. Okay, look, you're shifting the goalpost on me, and I'm not enjoying this conversation, so you can go back to Claire now. You're shifting the goalpost.
Thanks, Vincent, for stopping by. Hold on, Simos, because we're not talking with Vincent. We're talking with Claire, and I'm been trying to wrap this for 5 minutes. Vincent, thanks for stopping by. We might have you on someday. I appreciate you stopping in and giving your position on it. Thanks, Vincent. Later, man. That having been said, let's get back to Claire. I'm sorry, that's who we had on the interview, and I don't want to take up the whole time. If anybody else has any questions, for Claire Khaw and secular Koranism, please, by all means, put them in the Q&A. I don't think we got onto many of the subjects. Phantom, what's your thoughts on? Do you had some other subjects you wanted to discuss on her model?
Well, there was the state-owned slaves. I wanted to talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Claire, how does that work and why?
Well, I think we're already the slaves of our government. They're just being polite and calling us citizens and people with rights. But, at the, they can easily take our rights away. And so I was thinking, there will be people who are officially the slaves of their government, and they will have to open an account, and all the slaves would have the right to manumission.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Did you say open an account?
Yes, because in
like
the UK,
a checking account?
Let me explain. In the UK, we have something called the Department of Work and Pensions. So you have a kind of pension account that the government tracks, your pension payments and stuff like that. And I think it could easily open a manumission account. So with the idea that all slaves have the right to manumission, except that, it's at a different level. You have to have earned, whatever amount it is, and then you're free, and maybe you want to stay the slave for a bit longer to, save a bit and, get your, for a mortgage or whatever it is you want to save up for. And then you can, leave the system and be a free person. And I don't see why it's going to be such a terrible thing. Everyone assumes that it's going to be being whipped to death and picking cotton. It doesn't have to be. The Romans had scribes who were slaves. They had civil slaves. So I don't understand this sort of horror of it. And if you read Euripides, you will see that queens were made into nannies when when Troy was sacked, and Queen Hecuba was taken away after the Greeks stormed the citadel. So
this is a Stone Age scenario.
You're saying, hey, these ancient people, they did this slavery thing. Maybe we should bring that back. And I'm like, I don't
well,
care.
It was what made America great. I mean, come on.
Troy did not make
Irish people get across the Atlantic if they hadn't sold themselves into indentured servitude.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to give you a thank you right quick on the association of making America great and the intention of slavery, because I think we've pointed this out in comedy bits and everything else. To make America great again was in some sense bringing back slavery, is embedded ideal in making America great to start with. So I think I know you're not a representative of Trump or that group, but I'm glad to hear that it's said in the open.
So
Can I just say, to add in, I'm starting a new political group called Make the Roman Empire Great Again.
Well, slavery is an institution like marriage and prostitution. It'll never go away because people will find it useful.
So
there will be people who want to sell themselves into slavery to, get something they can't currently afford.
Claire,
A
murder is
mortgage
useful. I
a
covered
kind of
this before.
slavery.
Murder is useful, Claire. It's just not moral. You being useful doesn't have anything to do. Like slavery can be extremely useful, but it's not moral. I mean, robbing banks is useful for the person that's robbing them. Killing people is useful for the people who want them dead.
For soldiers,
moral.
Yes. So yeah, it depends on the context ultimately, because yes, killing people, yes, it's murder, but not if it's in, a state endorsed execution, or if you kill somebody in the battlefield as a soldier. I mean, it all depends on context, and there's always exceptions to rules.
So what is this slavery that you're talking about? What does that get you? That
you get
getting
a
job,
labor
hey,
force.
I wasn't fit. What does that get you that having a job doesn't?
For people who need to pay their debt to society, it's cheaper than incarceration, isn't it? Because it actually costs a lot of money to put people in jail in the UK. I know you have companies like Serco who actually use slavery to make their private prisons profitable. And that explains why people like Kamala Harris were so happy to imprison parents whose children played truant.
So are you saying slavery as opposed to prison? Is that what you're saying? Like we replace prison
because
with
slavery is actually legal in American prisons, isn't it?
I've heard that. I don't know.
Well, it is if you look up your list of amendments.
Yeah, people
So
that
it never
are
really
convicted
goes
for
away.
felonies. But it's work release is what it is. Most of it's work release. If they don't want to work, they're getting a benefit for working, not forcibly driven to work. They're getting access, getting out, and things like this.
Well, it's the most efficient form of work there, right? Because America is having problems with its labor force, and I think it its origins lies in the British and Americans banning slavery. And now you have this welfare state that's eating you out of house and home.
Can I try to steel man what I think you're trying to say?
Please do.
Okay, so and I'm going to try to say it's not slavery, but let's say you can't find a job, and so you sign a contract with, say, the Department of Labor, the Federal Department of Labor, and they are going to make sure you have a job, and that you get paid for that job, and they house you. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Because then
why call it slavery? Like seriously,
because people will complain that it is slavery. So I'm just heading them off at the pass and say, yeah, it's slavery. What are you going to do about it? And it's not as horrible as you think. It's not picking cotton and being whipped to death. That Hollywood
slavery
always portrays.
Is like what I just described is a voluntary relationship. Slavery is not, and that's what people are like. When you say slavery, that's what they're objecting to, is the involuntariness.
Well, she doesn't want voluntary. It's in the man. I mean, you can read her manifesto. I don't mind putting it on the page.
Okay, so because what I described was voluntary. You can't find a job, so you sign a contract. That's something you choose to do. If it's not voluntary, it is slavery. That's so.
Well,
the word is apt and it's gross.
Well, people do say there are two kinds of slavery, right? There's chattel slavery and indentured servitude. But I mean, chattel slavery is, you conquer a country and you take slaves, and that was how it would work before. But I guess eventually even the chattel slaves would be freed. if there is a principle of manumission as being the human right of every slave, which is what I support.
Robin, did you have something to say?
Hey, Robin, how's it going?
It's going good. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Robin.
Yeah, I was talking to Claire in chat. Thank you for coming on. Like, I think you're probably pretty brave to come up here on this panel. Actually,
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure you knew that you were going to be met with a lot of somewhat angry people. My concern when I listened to you talk last time was I've been married, divorced twice.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 2 children out of wedlock.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always worked, and I haven't been married for like over 25 years, so I've been divorced for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I, from what I understood last time that you were on, that my children would be somewhat discriminated against based on my choices, my life choices.
Right.
Was I correct in that?
Yes. You're talking about my education system. So I have proposed 3 kinds of schools: A schools, B schools, and B plus schools. So A schools are for the children of the legitimate children of married parents, and you're still legitimate even if your parents divorce, right? And then there's B schools being for bastards, but you can have parents who regret being bastard, having illegitimate offspring.
We don't call them bastards anymore, like in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll call them
illegitimate
born
children.
out of wedlock.
There's just no reason to treat them separately or differently.
But you can call them illegitimate children. I guess that would be
or children born out of wedlock, which is a bit of a mouthful. But anyway, that's the purpose of like A, B, and B plus school. So if you are an unmarried parent and you are repentant, then your child goes to B plus school, right? And you might even decide to marry your sex partner with whom you had your child with, and then it goes to A school. It's
okay. I like that. Like my first daughter, we had our child first, and then we got married, and then we got divorced. So would that put that child in
would stay at A school the whole time?
Because we ended up getting married after she was born?
Yes.
Okay. But my second daughter would have to go to
B school.
Yeah, because I never married her father, actually. He was not one of my husbands. So I had no children with my first husband. But
yeah, but it's not that hard to get to B plus school because all you have to say is I wish I got married, but it happened, and shit happens, and so I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. My the other parent of my kid doesn't want to marry me, or he's unsuitable, or whatever, and
yes,
this will be actually quite common. I think there will be more B schools than there will be A school, so you shouldn't feel discriminated against. But I mean, you do understand that it would be better for your child if it did have a stable family, a stable.
Yeah, but like her dad was abusive, and he's a nut, and like I wished I had maybe chose somebody better to be her father, but I don't regret not marrying him. But like she is also like she earned a college scholarship. Like,
oh, well done.
A full ride. She has a full ride to go to college. And so like it seems to me that if she was like sent into B school, that would have damaged her ability as obviously a really good student to earn an academic place in college. where like if she had not been allowed to attend a better school, because I'm going to guess that like A schools are probably going to get the best teachers. I mean, like
No, no, that's where you would be wrong. There would be equal allocation of resources. So it's not like, A schools are going to get, bigger stadiums and better labs, and they would have the same, kind of school equipment. But obviously, if you're an ambitious teacher, you would kind of want to go to, the B or B plus schools, because I've heard it said that, some, from the better families, where the parents really care about their children, they'd have tutors, and the children practically teach themselves. And it's the, more, schools in the more difficult neighborhoods who are, more of a challenge to teach. And I guess the more dedicated teacher would prefer the challenge. But certainly the resources would not be.
But Claire, you're
different.
already writing them off as the more troubled children because they're in the B class school. You're already writing them off as they are the more troubled children with worse parents, by your own terminology, because that their mother wasn't married.
Yes. Well, I can't, ignore that.
That's just reality, yeah.
And then let me just say, my oldest daughter is actually a teacher in California. She teaches biology and chemistry, and she teaches in a very, rural district in California, where a lot of her students are like minority groups and everything, and it's very hard. I mean, her job is very hard. It is very hard. She has like she has like 40 kids, almost 40 kids in her class. A great deal of them don't speak English. So yeah, like it is hard to teach in a district where you are teaching, with those circumstances. That's not always just challenging.
May I just ask a quick question on this schools issue, which is how are you going to ensure equal funding for all the schools?
Well, in terms of equipment, like chairs and tables and,
But like, what is your funding? What's your proposed funding plan?
Not just equipment. No, I mean, obviously that teachers' wages, etc., need to be the same.
Why
as well.
separate them at all? Has that even been addressed, Simon? Like, why separate the children at all? Like,
I'm just more curious about whether the funding is going to be racist as well. That's all.
Okay.
Well, like it already.
No, it's not going to be racist. But I'd be happy to answer your question about why separate them. To make a point. Okay. I mean, a lot of these proposals are to make a point. To
make a point to whom?
To
the child or to the adult? Because who's paying for the point to be made? No, Claire, who is paying for the point to be made? Is it the child or is it the parent that's paying for the point?
It's a parent.
Okay, and you don't think that the child is paying for this point to be made?
The child would absorb the idea that it is more desirable to be a married parent than to be considered a sex offender.
Right. So the problem is that all of your model, it penalizes people unfairly and unjustly. Like all of your model seems to do that. And now it's penalizing children for something that parents done. And this is some old school religious ideology that is, it's always been bad.
Yes, because all religions are about supporting marriage.
So would I be considered a sex offender?
I'm afraid so. But look, okay, let's say secular Koranism happens tomorrow. Let's say it happens tomorrow, and you. Okay, well, I'll just say me. I had sex with somebody who wasn't my husband, and then it's like, oops, and then secular Koranism comes into force tomorrow. There would be a year of grace. So anybody who conceived, just before,
mighty kind of you.
Yeah, they will not be punished. But obviously the point has
grace
to be
is
made.
The right word.
Yeah. How is it racist? I didn't mention race at all.
Hold on, Faye. 1 second. Just point of order. point of order. We're going to do around the thing because we're fixing to be closing up. Phantom, I'm going to start with you there at the bottom, and then we're going to go across the board and get your last words, and we're going to end it off with Claire here. Phantom, what's been your total thoughts on that? And also reminder everyone, there is a poll up. If y'all go ahead and vote in that. I want to see what the total numbers are.
My final thought is I think this has been the most amazing unselling pitch I've ever heard.
Okay. Anything particular that struck you as this is untenable, or just doesn't sell it for you, or what?
Unselling, not selling, unselling.
Okay.
No, it's all dog shit. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Fair. Robin, thoughts?
I just want to thanks Claire for coming up. Like I said, I think you're pretty brave to show up here today and talk to us. And we're probably not the most.
Thank you, Robin, being.
Yeah, we're probably not the most endearing people to your ideals, but because we're looking to make the world into a place with less discrimination and more freedoms for others, and it seems like that your program would take us back thousands of years. But I appreciate you coming, and thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to pull you off the stage. We'll pull y'all off the stage, but hang tight if y'all want to chat after. I'll chat with everybody for a little bit before I close it up once we come off stage. Simos, last words?
Yeah, last words, I guess, would be to say, apart from, some of these like old European neo-fascist ideas that are in this particular part, which I'm not surprised because it's the Koran after all. But apart from all of that and all of the ill thought through consequences of some of the I don't know, projects that you're envisioning, I think that the words secular and Koranism are just contradiction. They're just a flat out logical contradiction. Secularism is basically without religion. That doesn't mean that you can't be religious and have your say in society. That's fine. But to base a secular society on Koranism is a direct contradiction. So just from the get-go, it's badly thought out. And, I think it needs a lot of reforming before you can make it into something which is even vaguely sensible or viable especially, and then a lot of the things that you are looking at and legislating on, or trying to envisage a legislation on, are just just ignorance of science, number one, and secondly you're trying to make them all black and white. Right, this is the typical black and white fallacy. Right, there's a lot more nuance in the world, and especially when you're talking about a population of 330 million people, to start categorizing them into 4 groups is just a nonsense. It's just flat nonsense. So as much as it's always interesting to hear new ideas, although unfortunately not yours, it is the case that I think that you're talking about one of the more sophisticated constitutions in the world. It might not be the greatest, it might not be the best, it might not be etc., whatever. But one thing it is trying to be a mixing pot of world ideas, deliberately set up that way by the founders, and in all of the whatever it is, 200 years, 1776, I believe. So yeah, maybe just less than 200 years, or no, maybe just more than 200 years. As much as it might be the case, it happens to become the dominant economic system. The currency is the dominant economic currency in the world. It spread the English language further and wider than the English did, that's for sure. And, I don't understand why you think that might be a bad thing, right? Or you're being so harsh and saying that the country needs such a devastating reform that it could never be once again. And lastly, as for going back to slavery, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, it's a lot. Just going back to slavery thing, which I didn't categorize. You haven't said which group you think should be the slaves, And I suspect very strongly that you're talking about people who were traditionally slaves in your country. And for that, I decry everything you stand for. Thank you very much. You're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Amos. I'm going to pull you off the stage, and I'm going to let Claire get her last words in here.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Amos. All right. That having been said, before I let Claire speak, I wanted to let y'all know that next Sunday, I am fixed to be moving to a Sunday schedule, and we're fixing to have Kurt on here next week. He'll be talking about the book of Mark, the history of it, and kind of the development of Mark. I love this subject. I was actually more anticipating this subject than the conversation that we're having presently, just because I geek out on Mark. So y'all stop by, join us. We are moving to Sunday, though. He's fixing to be on at the 2 o'clock schedule, but after that, we're moving to Sundays at 3 to 5 o'clock block. With that having been said, Claire, go ahead and tell us your final thoughts on it.
Thank you. I would just like to point out that oxymorons and contradictions do exist, and I don't see what's so unviable about having a list of the commandments of Allah being made into US legislation. I don't see what he was talking about as regards science. There's nothing unscientific about secular Koranism, because I really don't think you need to tell people that married parents tend to give their children a better start in life, and that's what I'm trying to do. But there's also nothing wrong with being black and white, because then you can decide what to do more easily. As for the US Constitution, I'm a great admirer of this proposition nation, and I wish more people, more Americans especially, would trouble themselves to read the farewell speech of George Washington, who said so many things that so many administrations completely ignore. The number of years since 1776 is 250 years, which is a nice round number. As for slavery, I certainly would never say that only certain races would be enslaved. I would say anyone who finds himself bankrupt or having to pay back their debt to society in lieu of being incarcerated in a very expensive prison, they could do their work there in a way that is that would give them accommodation and food, so they do not starve on the streets, and allow themselves to be rehabilitated as well as
hey, I'm sorry to stop you there. Someone has hacked my account here or something by YouTube. They're making comments on the side chat that is 100% not fucking me. So I'm not sure what's going on with there, but I'm gonna have to do some resetting on the YouTube. But we're going to close it up on that, and I'm going to have to figure out what's going on. But these comments on the side, these aren't me. But Claire, go ahead and wrap up your last few words.
Right. And that's it. I would never say only certain races would be slaves. I think Simos has a completely wrong idea about me. And thank you everyone for entertaining my ideas, and also I'm so glad that Vincent managed to come along and explain his ideas and distinguish them from mine. And thank you again, Robert, for having me.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for stopping by.